Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. This video is going to be a deep dive with a fairly recent deck added to my collection, which is called Le Tarot des Paysages Intérieurs by Camille. This is a deck that I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to deep dive or how I'm going to share that with you. But in deciding to start somewhere, I figured a flip through first impressions kind of chat would be a good place to start. This is a deck that is very abstract and designed to be read completely intuitively. There is no guidebook. So we shall see where this deep dive takes me. When I saw this deck, it really appealed to me. And it appealed to me in part because it feels very wintry to me, and it is hard for me to find wintry decks that I also like the looks of. Whether a deck is wintry, obviously, being an entirely, subjective personal impression. So I picked up this deck on Etsy. I'll link the creator's shop below. The deck is not currently in stock, but it is a deck that's done in very small print runs. So the title card here tells me I have deck 35 out of 60 in the second printing. So my hope is that the deck will come back in stock at a later date when another printing is done, but in the meantime, you can take a peek at the shop for other things if you would like. The deck comes just like this, wrapped in paper, with no box or any other packaging. The creator, I think on her listing, said something to the effect of, we all like to gripe about crappy tarot boxes, toss them, and put our decks in beautiful bags, so environmentally, why not just skip the box? And I think that that's totally fine. I ended up picking up a pouch, which I'll show you, on Etsy as well. And it's made out of recycled pants. So it's a wrap style bag that will protect my deck that I'm quite happy with. And I chose it based on, in part, the back design, which has this kind of beige and linear pattern that I thought would look good with the denim. So the title card is in French, as are all of the titles in the deck. Briefly and roughly, understanding that my French reading is not perfect, the Tarot of Inner Landscapes is the title, and the card reads approximately: I invite you inside yourself in the infinite space made of your personal stories, your memories, and your emotions. Let the images take over you, or abandon yourself to the images. Let them invade you. If an emotion, a memory, a sensation appears, welcome it. Images and sensory perceptions allow us to enter the subconscious. Your imagination is the best way to meet yourself, or to get to know yourself. And then here in the smaller text below, it just says that the tarot is made of original artwork that is oil paint on paper. So it is an oil paint artwork based deck. And it is one that I think is really interesting and really is one that evoked feelings when I saw it, we'll put it that way. So there is some nod to what we would recognize as perhaps Smith-Waite type imagery, but it is very abstract. So we have the Fool, Magician, and you can see here there are some magician's tools at the bottom of the image there, a cup, and something that could be a sword perhaps. High Priestess, the Empress. Again, very, very abstract, but I feel like I can see a a figure, a curvy figure of lying down outside here. Emperor. Hierophant. Lovers. There's some interesting lightning happening up there. Chariot. I think there's kind of a horse head image over here, and the person is wearing a crown, which is interesting. This is like the chariot from the back kind of view. Justice. There's a sword here. Hermit. Wheel of Fortune. Strength. Hanged. The death card, or what would be the death card, is number 13, is unnamed. Here you can definitely see what looks like maybe a scythe here, and the larger figure with the scythe looming over the smaller figure there. Temperance. Devil. Tower. Definitely a sense of people falling here and something going on in the background. Étoile, the star. This does look like someone kind of kneeling beside some water there. Lune, the moon, and the moon is present. Soleil, sun, judgment, and le monde, the world. I like how green the world card is. The colors are quite muted in the deck. The majors. You can see there's a lot of grays. This is why it feels wintry to me. You know, looking outside feels like this a lot of the time. In the winter with the snow and the slush and the gray clouds. The Ace of Swords. This feels like the most representational of the cards so far. Definitely a very clear hand holding up a sword here that one would expect. Two of Swords, and the person definitely has two swords there. Three of Swords. I really like this. I like that they're not impaling anything. And I like something about the way that the swords are focused on the head of the figure and thinking about the swords as mental or intellectual or psychological, airy. This feels like a good representation. 4. See someone lying down there with the fourth sword lying down beside them. 5. 6. The people walking, perhaps walking away from the swords there. 7. This feels fairly Smith-Waite informed, perhaps a person carrying 5 of the swords, as many as they can, and 2 are left over here. 8. 9. I don't know how much the kind of feel of these comes across on camera, but there's definitely a real sense of kind of anguish to this posture, I feel like. And this dark shadow behind them. And all the swords pointing kind of towards them. 10. This could be blood, I think. I'm trying not to say everything I say in every card because then we'll be here all day. That'll be in the entire deep dive. We'll just be looking at the cards. I want to do more than that. Page. The Knight. Here the horse head coming in from the side, which is interesting. Queen. And King. So the courts are traditionally named. Ace of Cups. Very small Ace of Cups. The seed of the water suit. You know, start small, I guess. 2. I don't know if it will come across, but there is a second cup here. There's one here and one here. 2 figures holding them. The 3 looks spilled. Maybe a little too much excitement in the 3 of Cups there. 4. This looks kind of fetal position happening. 5. And this does look like a few of them have spilled and some are upright, as we see in the 5. 6. Here they're faint, but the cups are over here in the corner. 7. 8. Really get that sense of walking away from those cups. 9. And 10. So definitely some of them maybe more straightforwardly representational than others, I would say. This page looks like they're kind of frolicking here, holding this. With the horse beside and the knight. Queen. And king. It's interesting with these, you can't really tell if the figure is intended to be facing towards the viewer or away in some of these cases. The bâton, or the wands. There's these pops of really strong color are interesting to see where those turn up. I like the prominence of the red in some of these wands because that is a fiery color. 4. 5 of wands. The 5 figures there. 6. 7. There's something a bit ominous about this over here in that 7. 8. It's like the wands have been let loose or thrown, or perhaps they're coming this way towards this figure here. 9 and 10, and definitely get here the sense of the 10 of Wands, you know, carrying this bundle of wands there. And last of all, the Pentacles. Here called Pentacles, but of course, you know, we don't get something as clear as a coin or pentacle. 2. I really like the colors in this card. This is cool. 3. I like this kind of, this feels like a kind of billowy robe here, holding all of the pentacles close. 5. Here the 5 coins are out of reach here, which is interesting, this figure. It feels like this figure is over here, you know, not being able to access those coins perhaps. Though I do think there's, you know, a deck that is this abstract does evade any attempt to kind of describe what's going on in terms of a figure doing particular things. There's something that feels kind of fruitless about trying to put that linear of a narrative onto images like this. I do really like the colors in this suit though, so much. Here the 9 pentacles are piled on top of the person, which is interesting. So that is the Tarot of Inner Landscapes. It is going to be an interesting one to get to know and to kind of figure out how to get to know and, you know, share that deep dive process with you all. When I first got this deck, with it not having come with any packaging, I kept it out on my desk for quite a while, just unshuffled, and I would just kind of look through it and think about it and, you know, ponder it, because I didn't want to go put it on my tarot shelf with no bag or case or anything to protect it. It has kind of delayed, I guess, my starting to really work with this deck, because I didn't want to, you know, just put it somewhere and have all the cards out loose and have something get lost or dirty or something. So now I feel like I can finally shuffle and really start working with this. The cardstock, for folks who would be wondering about the cardstock, is pretty matte You can see my ring light a little bit there, but like there's a finish on it, but it's not glossy. It's pretty bouncy. It's not very thick. To compare to the tarot size, I have a tarot deck I can compare it to. It's definitely wider. So this is a standard tarot size card from a Make Playing Cards deck, which is the Diverse Tarot de Marseille. This is the same height, but it's quite a bit different in the width. So you can see how wide it is there. The height, is it the same? Oh no, the height might be just a little bit. It's just a little tiny bit shorter than a standard tarot, but almost, I would say imperceptibly so, but definitely way wider. So, and these actually feel, these feel not dissimilar. This is, I think, probably Superior Smooth from Make Playing Cards. I don't actually remember, but I think it's Superior Smooth. This feels somewhat akin to this. It is not as firm when you bend it, though. This is definitely more flexible, definitely thinner, but the finish is very similar. So there's a cardstock comparison. So I, really have no idea what this deep dive is going to look like. You've heard my initial thoughts now. From there, I am going to do some thinking about how to best work with this deck. I don't know if I'll share maybe a sample reading, share some pairings, what exactly this is going to look like. But I'm really excited to think about and engage in this deep dive with a deck that is going to, I think, be so very personal in terms of how it's interpreted, because it's, there's no guidebook, there's no set interpretations for any of these. This is a deck that is designed to be about the memories and feelings and sensations that it evokes in me as a reader. So in approaching it in the spirit that it is intended, I will be very interested to see what comes up, and I look forward to sharing those impressions with you all. Okay. So I've been working with Le Tarot de Paysages Intérieurs for a number of months now, and I've been reading it in different combinations with different oracle decks. I'll share some of those later. I've also been trying different sizes of readings. The cards are large, so nothing too huge, but anything between 1 card and kind of 6. And trying the deck in different, styles of reading, in the sense of reading with a more defined spread versus reading more freeform. Really just trying to experiment with the deck and see where this deck might excel for me. And this is something that I do with, a lot of decks that come in new to my collection, but particularly decks that are, unlike other decks in my collection, that are not perhaps so traditional. So I like to see, how those decks read. And at the same time that I've been doing this and playing around with this deck, I have been in a class with Kelly Fitzgerald of The Truth in Story on reading skills. And this is reading skills not for any particular system like Lenormand or Tarot or Oracle, but reading cards, at a very high level kind of discussion of reading cards. And so we've been having conversations in that class about topics like what kind of reader we are, what our approach to the cards is, what kinds of questions we like to read for ourselves, for other people, what kinds of readings we might not read for ourselves and other people, all different kinds of questions about how we read and why. And that ranges from the kind of the most philosophical, thinking about how we think tarot works, down to the most kind of granular considerations, about how we might phrase a particular spread position, right? Really wide-ranging conversations. I'll link to Kelly's class below because you can purchase the class as a replay and get access to the videos and all the handouts and everything like this. I took it live though. So I've been working with this deck while having these kind of conversations and discussions about these different ways of reading. And I've landed in a place where I'm reflecting on the relationship between one's reading style and the decks that one uses, right? And here I want to present maybe some questions more than I want to present any particular kind of thesis or any particular answer here, right? But I've been thinking about this with reference to Le Tarot des Paysages Intérieurs, specifically because, of this title card that comes with the deck, which I've mentioned, already. And the title card talks about, entering one's personal stories, one's memories, one's emotions, letting your perhaps kind of analytic mind fall away in a particular sort of way. The card doesn't say that, but this is how I think of it. And letting whatever kind of emotion or memory or sensation might arise when you're looking at a particular card to wash over you, and welcoming that, and this, way of exploring oneself and one's subconscious perhaps through reading the cards, right? And so I've been thinking about that as I work with this deck. And I know about myself that this is fundamentally not how I read tarot at all. Okay? When I read, I don't, for the most part, sit with an image and see what comes up in terms of personal memories or emotions, right? I know that for me, I am a reader who is very question-based. I read tarot and other forms of divination to answer questions, right? And sometimes those questions are very concrete. Should I do A or should I do B? Should I teach a class this September or should I not? Sometimes those questions are more introspective, we could say, in terms of how to best work with a particular new moon, how to work with a particular intention, exploring how I feel about particular kinds of things, but I'm very much a reader for whom the question asked in a reading is very important, because to me the cards answer a question, right? And that's true whether I'm reading with a defined spread or in a more free-form way, whether I'm reading for myself or whether I'm reading for someone else. The question is very important to me. Also important to me when I read tarot specifically is tarot as a system, or a set of systems, if we want to distinguish, say, Smith-Waite and Marseille or something like that. But tarot is a system. So for me, for example, this card, this is the Empress, Impératrice. When I'm reading tarot, the fact that this is the Empress is important, right? Beyond what any particular Empress card, including, but not limited to this one, might have on it, or might make me feel when I see it, the fact of it being an Empress is important. Because there is something, I think, or some series of somethings, that are common for me across Empresses, right? Some shared meanings built up over time, such that, whether a particular Empress card has a person on it or doesn't have a person on it, whether it perhaps has an animal on it or a landscape on it, what colors it has featured most prominently, and so on. Regardless of all of those things, there is something about empressness, right, that is important to me when I'm reading tarot, and I hope that that makes some kind of sense. I don't know if it makes sense or not, but I know what I mean, right? So I think that I'm a reader for whom the system in question, presuming there is one, is quite important, right? Of course, you know, lots of oracle decks don't necessarily have a system of suits, for example, in the way that tarot does. Reading an animal deck is quite a different experience than reading a tarot deck. Reading an animal oracle is different than a tarot deck. And so I've been thinking about, you know, the ways in which different kinds of decks might invite different kinds of reading, you know, and to what extent different kinds of decks are perhaps more or less flexible and open to different kinds of reading, such that different kinds of readers might be drawn to them. And so this deck for me, you know, it is quite abstract, and it is a deck that is described by its creator as one that, you know, is to be engaged with by, you know, introspection and seeing what comes up. And I don't, to be clear, I don't read the creator as being in any way dogmatic about this, right? Not at all. This is an invitation, right, to one's inner landscape, and this is the kind of inspiration of the deck as I read it. But I've had a great time with this deck, and I'm really enjoying this deck, even though this is not really how I read tarot, I would say. My eye goes to the text quite quickly with this deck because I want to know which card is which, and some of them it's not as clear as others. Right? The Eight of Wands, you know, has 8 flying wands on it. It's pretty quick to see which card it is. Not all of them are quite as quick. But so my eye goes to the text because when I'm reading, say, a 3-card reading with this deck, I want to know what the 3 cards are. And I think that happens for me. I've been noticing this. This happens for me even before I look at the artwork. My eye goes to the text because that system of tarot is important to me when I read. But this deck for me is capacious enough to accommodate that. I don't feel that I'm reading, you know, against the deck in any way, because it is a deck that is so much inspired by that kind of very personal, intuitive hits that one can get when reading. You know, that inspiration is in no way hindering me as a reader who maybe doesn't quite read that way, right? And so I have a couple of other decks here just to kind of illustrate my thinking, right? And I went to try to find the deck in my collection, tarot only, that I thought was perhaps the most different from Le Tarot de Paysages Intérieurs, just to try to illustrate my point, right? And the deck they came up with was the Orbifold Tarot. And for folks who are unfamiliar with the Orbifold Tarot, it is a deck with a quite complex system of color associations built into it. It's a very sparse deck. And it is one that, you know, is very much rooted in element. You know, so we have the green here for the earthiness of the page, with the blue at the bottom for water, for the water suit. You know, the red for the fieriness of the night at the top, with blue at the bottom for the water suit, and so on. And the minors have this kind of very numerological sensibility about them, right? Color and number. This to me is a deck that you would never think, or at least I would never think, to approach by laying out a card, gazing into the image, and seeing what personal memories arose, as the Inner Landscapes Tarot suggests reading, right? Like this deck to me defies that kind of reading by its very design, by its structure, This is a deck that I appreciate very much because it's hard for me to imagine a deck that would read more neutrally than this. It's number and element. It's stripped back to nothing else. There's no facial expressions to contend with. There's no animal associations to consider. There are no herbs. There are no crystals. There are no actions, being committed. None of that. Right? It's color and number. That's it. And so this to me is a deck that and I don't think of my decks in a personified way, but it's a deck that wants to be read in a particular sort of way, right? That is very different than this. Then we have decks, like this. This is the Melaneda Classic Tarot, the Smith-Waite style deck. And, this is not pared down in the way something like the Orbifold is. It's not abstract in the way that something like the Inner Landscapes is. Here we have people doing things, right? But besides the fact that we have people doing things and different symbols, we also have decades and decades and decades of interpretation. Decades and decades of writing and analysis of what these cards mean and what they might mean in different readings to draw on. And for me as a reader, those are things that I want to draw on. And for me, there's something, if there is something that every Nine of Cups shares, if there's some core to the Nine of Cups, I'm going to probably find some hint of it here. You can also think about Marseille decks as perhaps comparable to this in the majors, certainly. Oh, I have these out. I'm going to put... I don't want to give spoilers about what I'm doing in my top tarot trumps VR. Putting some aside here. So the Marseille, we have numerologic minors that are also, as I read them, elementally based, or certainly are affiliated with a particular suit. And that means something. The number means something. Perhaps the flourishes around the edges of the minors mean something as well. Certainly in this deck, I think that they do. Could one read a deck like this in a purely intuitive way based on the feelings that it evokes, with no reference to tarot as a system? Maybe. It's not how I would approach it, though. So that's kind of interesting to think about. So this is the kind of thoughts that have come up for me. And again, I know that this is a bit of a strange thing to include in a deep dive. Maybe I'll cut it. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll put these musings somewhere else. Who knows? But what Le Tarot de Paysages Intérieurs has been really interesting for me is that it is a deck that has prompted me to really consciously think about how I read tarot while I am doing so. Which, as somebody who does not class themselves as a beginner at this point, it's been a lot of years, has been a really interesting experience. And of course, this is a deck as well that, there is no guidebook for this deck, right? It is a deck that, the title card again, the title card that I keep going back to, your imagination is the best, the best thing to draw on. There's no suggested interpretations. There's no keyword sheet. And that is very deliberate with this deck. It is a artful, intuitive, emotional deck. And I think it's a very good deck. And I think as someone who doesn't read in the way that perhaps this deck speaks to most, it's still a really great deck for me. I think it's a very flexible deck, and I think that that's really a wonderful accomplishment of the creator. So I'm really glad that I picked up this deck when I did. So I would love to know your thoughts in terms of how you feel your approach to reading tarot and your choice in decks relate to each other. I'm going to comment below. And maybe I'll make a tag around this or something like that. Maybe I'll make another video getting into some of these kinds of questions because they're questions that I'm interested in how other folks, you know, think about and answer them for themselves. How is your reading style informed by your deck choice and vice versa? There's my question. And also, do you enjoy reading with more abstract decks? And if so, how do you approach them? You know, does your eye quickly go to the text to see which card it is first when you're reading a tarot deck that is more abstract before you go to the artwork and see what the artwork brings up for you? Or is it, you know, something that happens more in tandem? Or would you work with a deck like this with the titles chopped off? You know, these are all interesting reading style questions, I think. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I thought it would be interesting to share a sample reading with this deck and just to kind of talk my way through how I might interpret a small reading using this particular tarot, how I would approach it. I think that this is a deck, you know, that will really be experienced differently by different readers depending on how they approach interpreting the cards that turn up in a reading, depending on their style, and also depending on the type of readings that you do. I think it's a very open-ended deck, and so it will be one that is quite personal to the reader using it. I think that the easiest thing for me to perhaps demonstrate would be a 2-card reading that is one that often is the basis of my daily draw in the morning. And the 2 spread positions for that are what's going on today and how can I navigate that in the best way. What's going on today and how do I navigate that in the best way. So we'll see what comes up. What is the 2 of Cups? And the Ace of Cups. Okay. I'll zoom in a little bit and try to keep my shadow out of the way here. So, what's going on today? 2 of Cups. And how can I best navigate that? Ace of Cups. Here in the 2 of Cups, there's certainly a sense of connection, I think. This card, we do see 2 figures here, and what looks to be a cup in between them. I'm going to just look closely at the card for what 2 cups in between them. Okay, there are. One of them is just hard to see from where I'm sitting. There are 2 cups here. So emotional connectedness comes to mind with the 2 of Cups, right? In this particular image, it feels like, you know, maybe a meeting of the minds as well. We have this kind of connection of a kind of pinkish color here, linking the heads of the 2 figures. And the cups are resting on top of that. So, you know, maybe a intellectual connection, or a sharing of ideas, or just a conversation that, you know, lends itself to emotional connection, right, as something that could be going on today. And then the best way to navigate that is the Ace of Cups. And this ace, of course, we see here is overflowing. And there's a lot of space up above this ace. And I'm sure you can see there's these kind of faint lines above that are kind of a bigger cup, or that's what that looks like to me, is a kind of bigger cup outlined above faintly there. And what looks like a bit of a grassy, maybe field scene behind. It is subtle there. Certainly the overflowing cup is the focal point in this, as it is with many other aces of cups. So to give a kind of very brief, I guess, interpretation of how this might be read as a morning draw for me, today holds a possibility of kind of connecting with someone else through conversation, sharing ideas, minds coming together. And, there may be an emotional aspect to that, but the best way to navigate that then is with, I think, open-heartedness, sharing openly, not holding back, right? Again, this ace is overflowing. The water is exceeding its container, right? This is not a, dynamic to, hold back from out of nervousness or to, necessarily be too guarded around. I think that the Ace of Cups, is a suggestion to perhaps drop that a little bit, right? That there's real possibility here, but in order to, fully gain that possibility there, to really make that connection and to make that connection as meaningful as it could be, to be open. In working with this tarot deck, I have come up with a couple of oracle deck pairings to suggest. I have found that for me personally, this is a tarot deck that I prefer to use for smaller readings. Some of that is just for, the very kind of practical, logistical reason that the cards are quite large. So, you can see how much wider these tarot cards are compared to a standard tarot size like this one. So it's not exactly, at least in the space that I have to work with, 9 card square friendly, right? It's too large for that. And these images do have a lot going on to sink into and explore. I'm glad, actually, that they are bordered. I'm not somebody who's super fixed one way or the other in terms of preferring bordered or borderless. I think it's really art dependent, but I really like that this deck does have borders, because when you start to lay out these cards, it does give it a bit of a sense of containment and avoid everything just kind of running together and getting muddy. So I do like that. I've been using it in smaller readings of 1 to 3 cards for the most part. And so when I've put this deck with Oracle, it has tended to look like either 3 tarot cards and 1 Oracle, or 3 Oracle cards and 1 tarot, depending on the deck and the approach to the reading. Okay, so I had one pairing in mind when I bought this deck before I had ever seen it in person. And that is one of the pairings that I'm unsurprised to find that I prefer. And that is with Eric Mayle's Endless Oracle. This is an Oracle deck that I think, goes with Le Tarot de Paysages Intérieurs in terms of its color palette and this kind of muted tone overall. I think that they just look good together. I also feel like there's something fantastical about each of these. The Endless Oracle is, not abstract in the same way, but it certainly has to me a kind of mysterious, dreamy quality to it that I think complements the tarot deck quite nicely. So in terms of how I've put these 2 decks together and, kind of liked the outcomes the best, I have done 3 card readings with the Oracle and then had that connect into an overall theme of the tarot, which was chosen first. And for folks who aren't familiar with this Endless Oracle, these are cards that fit together so you could make kind of a scene when you lay out multiple of these cards together. And so putting 3 of these alongside of each other to construct a kind of narrative around an overall theme of a card from the tarot is a style of reading that I have found works quite nicely. This is even, manageable for something like a daily draw, if you wanted to do that. It's a bigger reading than I would normally do for a daily draw, but a kind of overall theme of the day, and then, the 3-card reading of your choice underneath, I think is a good approach. So that is perhaps my favorite pairing with this tarot. I also then started to think about this deck and think about landscapes. And if you watch my channel, you know that I like a landscape deck. So I started to think about what oracle decks might suit this tarot of inner landscapes, right, as the name translates to. And came up with a few pairings that way. One of those is the Crystal Forest. Tarot of the Crystal Forest. It's the Crystal Forests, an intuitive card deck, and it is a oracle. The box looks like this. I got this on Kickstarter quite some time ago, and that was the second printing. So in this oracle deck, each forest is inspired by a crystal. So here we have the smoky quartz forest with the keyword grounding. The text is gold and is not going to come up very well on the camera, I'm sure, but it is legible. The blue goldstone forest, authenticity. And again, I like the way that the tones of this deck look against the tarot. I think that they look quite attractive together. And so for this pairing, I have found myself more so either choosing one oracle and then having a small tarot reading around it, maybe a 3-card tarot reading around the theme of the one oracle, or doing a very small spread and just combining, the two. Something like what's going on in my day today, what will happen in my day today could be a tarot question, and then pick a crystal inspired oracle card to kind of carry me throughout the day, what I need to kind of call on to get through that day. I like combining decks in this way where, you might have a few different spread positions and a predetermined idea of, okay, deck number 1 is going to be used for these spread positions and deck number 2 for these other positions, and having a kind of rationale around why that is. I find that the kind of reading works quite well for me, so I think these work pretty well together. Okay. Oh, I'm making a mess here. Okay. So that is the Crystal Forests Oracle. A third one that I came up with, again, kind of thinking about the name of the tarot deck and being about inner landscapes, I thought of the Phenomena Oracle deck by Jessica Bott. And the Phenomena Oracle deck is weather themed. And I think that weather is an important part of a landscape. Is an important part of how I would experience an environment or a space or a place. And so thinking about inner landscapes, I could think about my own inner weather, my inner emotional weather, for example. And that is what led me to this kind of combination. And I think that for the most part, the colors work. Like these, I think, look really good together. Very, very different art styles, obviously. This is a digital drawing of some sort. And this is painting. But I think that they work. I think that they are an interesting combination. in terms of kind of doing a reading about the state of one's inner landscape or mindset, I think that these would be a good pair for that. Now, the last pairing that I thought of, again inspired by landscapes and the idea of landscapes, is a photography-based deck. And this is one of the first oracle decks that I've ever owned in my collection. That is the Life Path cards. These are by Kristen of Over the Moon Academy, a wonderful deck creator of many divinatory tools, not just decks actually. She's really amazing. These, I think, make an interesting combination. And so one approach to using these together that I had thought of was, having a path card, a life path card in the middle of the reading, and then having a tarot on either end as a way of thinking about kind of a journey from A to B, or from, say, present to future, and then what the kind of terrain of that journey, figuratively speaking, could look like. Now, these paths don't all have very clear beginnings and ends. Indeed, most of them don't. So I thought that kind of putting the tarot in the place of that beginning and ending of that path, or point A and B, it doesn't have to be a beginning and ending, but 2 points, I thought would be an interesting approach. I really like these life path cards. I think they're really cool. These are great for kind of meditative practice, like a pathworking practice as well. I think that the colors somehow work quite nicely between these two decks, which I didn't really expect, given that this is photographic and this is not. But somehow they work, I think. And like le tarot de Paysages Intérieurs, the life path cards also are cards that are intuitively read, I would say. There isn't a guidebook with this. There is a kind of life path cards course on Kristen's website somewhere. It's free. And she has some suggestions for thinking about different types of features, I guess we'll say. Thinking about whether the path in the card, has a lot of obstacles in it, whether it's open or more narrow, whether it's bumpy or smooth, and so on. But it's very much a deck kind of designed to be read based on one's own intuitive understandings, and the tarot is as well. So I think that they invite similar approaches, perhaps, and go together nicely in that way. So those are the pairings that I have come up with. If there's any particular pairings that you think that this tarot deck would go very well with, do feel free to let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching this deep dive into Le Tarot de Paysages Intérieurs. Let me know what you think. Do you have this deck? If so, what has been your experience of it? I would love to know. Or do you have a particular deck in your collection that, is a more abstract style of a deck? Let me know if so and how you work with that deck. I would love to hear. Thank you again for watching and have a great day. Bye.